Hi, it's Nancy Earl, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. And boy, have we got a show for you today. It's our Christmas show. So I have Mark Anthony here, the psychic lawyer, and we are going to talk about Christmas and all the different facets of Christmas. We're going to talk about the Christmas star. We're even going to throw in some Hanukkah tidbits and some information and history for you. But before I bring Mark on, let me just, if you haven't heard about Mark Anthony, let me give you a little bit of information. So sit back and relax. We've got Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer. He's actually also known as the psychic explorer. He's the author of the bestseller, Never Letting Go, and Evidence of Eternity. Mark's credentials are unparalleled in the paranormal world. He's a fourth-generation psychic medium. He's an Oxford-educated trial lawyer who's tried over 300 jury cases and is a member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar. He furthered his gifts of mediumship at the Arthur Findlay College for the Advancement of Psychic Science in England. Welcome to High Road to Humanity, Mark.
Thank you, Nancy. I always enjoy being on High Road to Humanity with you. And to everybody out there, season's greetings.
I know. Season's greetings, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all those good things, right?
Right. I like to run it all together and wish everyone a Merry Ramahana Kwanzaa. So.
Okay, that's awesome. So we're going to talk about some Christmas, all about Christmas. And I wanted to see if it was okay. Let's just start out with the Star of Bethlehem. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's coming up on this winter solstice.
Right.
And when you see, this star hasn't been visible for, let's see, since 1226.
That's true. And what's really spectacular, there's going to be what's called a conjunction. And a conjunction is when two planets, from our perspective, are so close that we can call it an alignment, but astronomers and astrologers prefer to call it a conjunction.
Right.
And the two largest planets in our solar system, Saturn and Jupiter, are going to be in conjunction on the winter solstice, which is December 21st.
Yeah.
And so all my friends that are in the field of astrology are really taking this one very seriously. They're telling me that this is a good thing because it's forming a conjunction in Aquarius, which is going to be bringing a lot of change. Well, be that as it may, the last time it was these two planets, from our perspective, appeared to be this close was in the year 1623. Right. And if you think about it, Galileo was alive then. Okay, and yeah, and the fascinating thing about Galileo, like Copernicus, he realized that the Earth was not the center of the universe, that the sun was, or at least in our solar system, that the planets orbited the sun. And Galileo, living in the Renaissance in Italy, and the Catholic Church held tremendous power, he was considered a heretic and blasphemous because, according to the Catholic Church, the universe was Earth-centered, not heliocentered. And it wasn't until the reign of Pope John Paul II, probably about 20 years ago or so, when the Catholic Church issued a pardon for Galileo. So he got his pardon. It took 400 years, but
he got it.
He did get it. He did get it. So, the original Star of Bethlehem has led a tremendous amount of speculation. In fact, Nancy, one of the lectures that I give, I call it the Mystical Magi, and then the subtitle is The Mystery of the Star of Bethlehem. Because we've all seen, the Christmas specials and the Christmas cards where there's this giant star beaming on a manger, right, and the three wise men are headed right towards it. Yeah. And nothing could be further from the truth. Because in the ancient world, astronomy and astrology were intertwined.
Right.
And the wise men were part of the Magi. They weren't kings, but they were the bureaucrats for, oh my gosh, this could get very complicated. Back then it was known as the Parthian Empire, but we'll just call it the Persian Empire because the Parthians are ruling Persia. And modern day Persia is Iran. And this country's always been a very powerful country in the Middle East. And I know that Iran gets a really bad rap because religious nut jobs have been running the country for the past 40 years. But when you look at the history of the Iranian people, it's a very deep culture, amazing artistic, scientific, literary achievements. And the Magi were the inheritors. They inherited the wisdom of the Babylonians, and Babylon is in what is now Iraq. And basically, by the time of the Magi, first century AD, the science, if you will, of astrology was already 2,300 years old. And so the Magi, part of what they did, they were the bureaucrats of the Persian Empire, but they also were known to have psychic abilities. They're known to be astrologers and healers. And they noticed a very unusual alignment that was forming, and based on their calculations and observations, it was forming within the constellation Aries. And in the ancient world, all of the countries had an astrological symbol, and Aries was the symbol for Judea. But it was more than just that. It was an alignment.
That's interesting.
Well, yeah.
That's really interesting.
And it was an alignment of Jupiter, which is the star of kings,
right.
Saturn, along with Mars and the sun. And to top it off, there was a lunar eclipse of Jupiter. So here you have an alignment of the sun, the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, all within the constellation Aries. But it gets even better than that, because modern astronomers have examined this particular phenomenon and found out that also Mercury and Venus lined up with them. So the 5 visible planets in the night sky, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, were all in alignment. Plus, there was a lunar eclipse of the star of kings, Jupiter, where, you know, the moon eclipsed Jupiter, all within.
I'm going to stop you a second. Stop you a second. So is that going to happen exactly the same? Will it be this? Will they all be lined up this time too? Will it be different?
I'm getting to that. Okay. And it all occurred within the constellation of Aries.
Okay.
And according to both Rutgers University and Notre Dame's astrophysics department, this particular alignment only ever happened once and will never happen again. And that is why the Magi, they said, okay, there's the constellation for Judea, the star of kings. So a king is going to be born in Judea, but a lunar eclipse of Jupiter meant a king of divine origin. And then when they're seeing a complete alignment of all the planets, they knew something was up.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So, and so this particular alignment is just of Jupiter and Saturn. But let me get back to the wise men real quick. It happened on April 17th of 6 BC.
Okay.
And I know that a lot of people think that, oh my gosh, it must have happened on December 25th. Well, December 25th is not ever mentioned in the Bible. Nobody knows when Jesus was born when you look at the scriptures. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of people saying that this conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn is going to be the new star of Bethlehem.
Well, hold on. Wasn't that, didn't we just adopt a pagan holiday? Isn't that how Christmas came about on the 25th? Isn't that pagan?
You're always the sharpest tack in the box, Nancy. Yes, you are correct. Because
but why did we do that? Why did we do it? We just adopted because we didn't know, so we just went with the pagans.
Well, that's a big part of it.
Okay.
The solstice is the beginning of winter, and in the northern hemisphere, it's the shortest day of the year. And people in the ancient world, in a pre-electrical society, were terrified of winter because you starved to death. Supplies ran low, people ran out of food. And the Romans, being the Romans, threw a big party. In fact, they had 2 parties. On the solstice, that was the Roman festival of Saturnalia. And Saturnalia was the god of agriculture. So the Romans had a big drunken, eat till you burst orgy, essentially, basically to venerate the god Saturn, to say, please, make sure we have food. And then a few days later, on December 25th, was the festival of Sol Invictus, which was to honor the god of the sun, because as the days became shorter, they wanted to honor the sun. So within a week, they had two big drunken, orgy feasts. And so as Christianity took the place of the pagan Greco-Roman religion in the Roman Empire, by the year 350 AD, I mean, the pagan religion was pretty much gone. There may have been a few people in some remote areas practicing it. Pope Julius I said, well, we need a date for when Jesus was born, so we'll replace Sol Invictus with Christmas, the birth of Christ, because Jesus symbolized the light coming into a world of darkness. So, yeah. And so really it's a beautiful thing. And that's what Sol Invictus was. I know I'm being cynical when I say the Romans had a drunken orgy, but they did.
They did.
And they did. Well, the Romans, they were like, live for today, for tomorrow we may die. When you study Roman society, the average lifespan in the Roman Empire at this time was 28 years old.
Oh, wow.
And if you look at, we talk about, the COVID pandemic, which is horrible. But back then, the diseases that they didn't understand would kill you. The common cold could kill you. The flu could kill you. Right. And certainly, being invaded and medical science was essentially non-existent, at least in the way that we understand it. And so it was very important to have the symbol of the light to overcome the darkness and the fear of winter.
Right. I want to ask you something. Now, I kind of got down to, I'm a kind of, get down to bare bones thing here. So I just have a question. I was checking it out online because I just think it's so cool that, we're going to have this conjunction, and it's going to be like the Star of Bethlehem. And I just,
sure.
It's the Star of Bethlehem. And I just looked it up, and I checked out what National Geographic had to say and everything. What do you feel? And then I looked up what people felt, that it was going to do astrologically for all of us, for our signs. And, what do you feel that it's going to change, because here we are. I mean, honestly, I know this is kind of an open question, but here we are in 2020, all this craziness going on, getting ready to go into 2021. We've got this, and I think we just had didn't we just have an eclipse?
We did.
Yeah, yes. And I wanted to mention that. And so now we're going to have the solstice. It almost feels like, and I'll just tell you this, it almost feels like this is a change. This is a big change going to happen. What do you feel psychically? Because, I just want to know what you feel on this.
Well, before I get into psychically, the astronomers the astronomers and the astrologers I've talked to, particularly the astrologers, feel that this is a big change, and that there is a destruction of the current world order to pave way for a new one. Well, certainly, I'm not going to be too nostalgic about 2020, and I'm not sure many people are.
Right.
So the deconstruction of 2020 to open the door to hopefully the beginning of the end of the COVID pandemic. Now, psychically, I'm glad that you asked that, and I posted this on Facebook about a week ago. Okay. For the past 7 months, I've been receiving messages during the readings that I've been doing. And I would say about 90% of the readings, the spirits discuss or bring up COVID. Because this is a planetary disruption. To sound Star Warsian, it's a disruption in the force. And I don't mean that to be funny.
No, that makes sense, because we're energy, and that's how I look at everything, is we're energy.
We're energy. In COVID, at the date of this broadcast, over 300,000 people so far in the United States alone have passed due to COVID or complications from it. And in these readings that the spirits were mentioning COVID, they kept telling me, reverse course, March 2021, reverse course, March 2021. And I started seeing this over and over. And we're talking 90% of the time. And what that meant was things are going to turn around. And this was going to be the beginning of the end. Well, so a couple weeks ago when they announced the vaccines were going to be released, and I just heard the other day that it appears that by March and April, um, the vaccines will be available to basically
General
the
public.
entire population.
Yeah.
And it made it, it was very validating that the spirit world essentially told me that. And I was just contacted by a client that I did a reading for last January. And during the reading, the spirit of her father kept showing me images of her and everyone around her wearing surgical masks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I said, "What's up with that? Are you like in the medical profession?" She said, "It doesn't make any sense." Well, she contacts me and she goes, "I was going over my notes," and she goes, "I couldn't believe it."
Oh.
She said, "This was brought forward by my father saying within 3 months, everyone's going to, be wearing masks." So the other side is very invested in us and our health and our well-being. And what's going on here in this world is very difficult, it's very painful, but it's ultimately changing everything. The question is, we'll be changing it for the better or for the worse?
Well, we're hoping for the better, huh?
Actually, Nancy, I believe it's going to be for the better.
I do.
I've spent a lot of time in Asia,
Okay.
and during the flu season, people there wear masks. Or if you're sick, you stay home. You don't go out to work. You don't sneeze. You make sure you have a mask, or if you do sneeze, you cover. In other words, when you look at Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan has almost 160 million people and less than 2,000 deaths. Why? It's because they've always used masks. They've always practiced washing their hands, sanitizing, and Americans don't. Okay, we just go around hacking and coughing and wheezing.
Yeah, well, we never had to before, so this was like a new thing for everybody.
Well, we did have to. We just didn't do it. Okay, because if we did, then the flu season wouldn't be so bad. They saw the cold and flu season. And when I was practicing law full time, I used to dread cold and flu season because walking into a courthouse, it's like a huge petri dish. And it's like by February everybody's sick. And so I think that what COVID has done will raise people's level of awareness on how to contain and control airborne diseases, raise a level of awareness on hygiene. And so these are all very positive things. And also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm going to tell you what I think about it. I think that this was a plan for whatever reason, it was done so that we had to stay home. And we had to go within and we had to realize what was really important. That's what I really believe. I really do. I really think that we have gotten so materialistic and we've gotten so outside of ourselves that this forced us to stay home and look within. And I think the people who did look within will progress and it will make a change vibrationally. But I think the people who didn't, I think will fall from the wayside. I know that may sound harsh, but that's where I believe it's come to. What's your feeling on that?
I couldn't agree more. I live on the Barrier Island, East Coast, Central Florida, and I'll tell you, for being in a pandemic, this was a great place to be. Not so much in hurricane season, but during the pandemic, and because we're relatively isolated. I mean, not hugely, but we're relatively isolated. But there's a lot of paths here, bike paths and walking paths. And what I noticed was parents spending time with their children. I'd see couples walking, holding hands. It was like, I mean, you always see things like that, but not to the extent that there was. And it was like, we all stopped for a minute. We got off the merry-go-round of insanity to reconnect to what was really important.
Right.
And what's really important are the people in our lives that we love. And it gave us a breather to do that. Unfortunately, I cannot help but to think of all the people facing these holidays and the rest of their lives with that empty chair at the table, the clothes that'll never be worn again. And for all the people who've lost loved ones to COVID, I know, and I know I speak for Nancy, we extend our most sincere condolences.
Yeah, that's true. You know, they say this came from China, um, and the population there is huge. Do you think, and I picked this up psychically, so I'm throwing it out there because it's my show and I can do that. But I almost feel like this was done intentionally to get rid of a lot of their older population. I keep picking that up. I've picked it up for a while, Mark. And, you know, that's what I really feel.
Psychically, I have felt that from day one.
Okay.
I felt that this was an engineered or somehow, well, engineered modified disease. But I
Mm-hmm.
also think that it wasn't intended to be released when it was.
Oh, okay.
I think that it is something that they were working on, and that it haphazardly got out, and then because it's so contagious, because there's so many things about it that are very suspect. The
Right.
fact that antibodies don't stay in a person's system very long, the intense um, contamination rate. I mean, it's so highly contagious. The way that you can be asymptomatic for a couple weeks before you get it. I mean, there's just so many things. It seems
Yeah.
like the new and improved virus. Now, certainly we could be wrong. And what people need to understand, that when you're psychic, we are not omnipresent. We are not all knowing and all seeing. We receive insights. But
Mm-hmm.
that's very fascinating, Nancy, because you got the same insight that I did. I have felt that this was a modified, because this whole story of it, oh, it came from a bat. Well, that's entirely
I
possible.
don't think so.
But yeah, I don't think so.
I
And
think
granted that,
I'll tell you what I feel since you said that. I feel that you're correct that it wasn't supposed to get out when it did. That somebody got it in the lab when they weren't supposed to. I do believe that it was intended for the Chinese, for their population, and it got out and it got over here and it got everywhere. And so yeah, but then you know you got to look at the whole picture. It's really interesting. Was this meant to happen? You know, obviously it was. You know what I mean? You have to
yes.
look at it in retrospect. Okay, so this happened. Now we know what goes on maybe behind the scenes. That's the 2020 thing. You know, we really see what's happening in the world. We're not, because you know, we've always been in this little bubble, you know, and we don't really realize what's going on in some of these countries and what they're really up to. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you have to look at, I mean, when has the Chinese government, even before the communist era, ever been known for its concern about human
I was
life?
going to say anybody. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you also have a communist dictatorship, which they're really not even communist. If they were communist, they'd all be like living on a commune and nobody be rich. What China is a capitalist military dictatorship. That's what China is, okay? And they're ruthless about it. And once again, China has a very deep, rich culture. I mean, thousands of years of intellectualism and incredible advancements, yet they are ruled by a repressive dictatorship. And if you look at, was it Thomas Malthus, and the projections of how world population will expand to the point where it is impossible to support human life on this planet. And so how do you decrease that population?
Right,
Well,
exactly.
yeah, if you take the Nazi approach, you know, you start putting people in concentration camps. Well, that's blatantly obvious, aside from being, you know, brutal and horrible. But
Right.
perhaps this is something that could have been part of a calculated plan.
Right, the silent
Um,
killer. Yeah. Hey, well, maybe we should get back to Christmas.
yeah. Well. Let me get back to what we were talking about
Yeah, yeah,
calculated and horrible leaders.
yeah.
Okay, so the Magi see this highly unusual astrological alignment, which is saying that, or indicating by their interpretation, that a king of divine origin was going to be born in the land of Judea. So they head off to check it out. See, the reason that the Star of Bethlehem wasn't a big Steven Spielberg-esque spotlight zooming in on a manger
Yeah.
is because King Herod would have noticed that. Okay. And in the presentation that I give, I get into the whole background of Herod.
Right.
And his court, the court of Judea, divination and astrology were forbidden for being, contrary to scripture. So they would not have first observed these very subtle signs in the sky, and secondly, if they did, know how to interpret them. But when a big flashy caravan from Persia arrives, filled with dignitaries, of course, he wants to know what's going on.
What's up?
Yeah, what's up? And so they tell him, oh, we've come to see the king. And Herod, he's kind of like the original Grinch. Oh, well, tell me where he is so that I may come and pay homage, And when you look at, look at the background of Herod, if this guy wasn't a sociopath, I don't know who was. He was an up-and-coming bureaucrat. He married into the Hasmonean dynasty. His wife, Mariamne, was royal. Well, once he establishes himself as her husband and the king, he proceeds to have pretty much all of her family, including her, executed. Had one of his sons executed, had over 300 of his military officers executed.
I didn't know that, Mark.
Oh, yeah. And throughout the course of his life, Herod ruled a long time. He outmaneuvered Ptolemy the Great. Pompey the Great. Pompey the Great, the Roman general. Then he outmaneuvered Julius Caesar. He outmaneuvered Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and eventually Octavian. He held on to his throne, by cajoling, Cleopatra hated Herod. She wanted him gone. She wanted his kingdom, but he was good buddies with Mark Antony, so Antony stuck up for him. Then Antony and Cleopatra, they're going to war against Octavian, and they say, well, Herod, we need your army to join us. Herod conveniently starts a war with the Bedouin Arabs and says, I can't, my forces are committed, because Herod wanted to see what would happen. Well, Antony and Cleopatra get crushed. Octavian shows up in Judea at the head of 100,000 Roman soldiers. Herod's army at that time, maybe best case scenario, numbered 15, possibly 20,000.
Okay.
And Herod went right to Octavian and said, I'm not going to apologize for supporting Mark Antony. He was my friend and I was loyal to him. And I will be loyal to you. And Octavian realized, well, this guy, he's running this country. He is loyal. I'll let him keep his throne. Brilliant guy. So let's fast forward. Now he's an old man. And he hears of the birth of a divine king from the house of David, because Jesus was descended from King David through his mother Mary. Now, this is a guy that's had 300 military officers executed, had most of his wife's family executed. There's a pile of dead bodies in his wake. Do you think he'd have any hesitation to murder a baby? And so even though there's no historical documentation of the murder of the infants, the murder of the innocents, after what he did to his own family and his own military, what would another couple dozen babies be? And let's face it, nobody in Herod's court or historians would have been stupid enough to have recorded it, because if he found out that you were doing that, you're going to join his wife and her son and her mother and her father and everybody else Herod had murdered. And so that's when you start looking at the background of this. And so the wise men, when they did meet with Mary, Jesus, and Joseph, they received a message from an angel in a dream. That's always cracks me up when people say that divination and psychic abilities are against the Bible, and it's filled with that. First, you have the wise men doing astrology, which is divination. Secondly, an angel, a spirit, comes to them in the dream and says, look, Herod's a nut job, you got to leave. And so they leave, and then Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, receives a message from an angel saying, get Jesus and Mary to Egypt pronto. Okay. And then after they're in Egypt. Yeah.
So just so everybody knows, sometimes we get a bad rap for being as psychic as we are. And, I'm so glad that you mentioned that the three wise men obviously were astrologers and that they all received psychic messages. And we all receive psychic messages. So having said that.
Well, we all do. And see, in these pre-Christian cultures, the court of Persia, they had the Magi on staff, and there weren't just three Magi, there was a lot of them. In fact, there were Magi stationed in Rome as ambassadors, Rome, Egypt, Greece. They were even stationed in the various princely states of India to the east.
Oh, wow.
So the Magi were a going concern, and in fact, it's also the root of the word magic.
Ah, there you go.
And the magicians, because the Magi, the Greek word for Magi translates into magic. So that's the root of all of this. So the Bible is, and our religions are filled with people with psychic abilities. And in this case, the Magi were good guys. Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, was a good guy because they were all receiving messages from spirits.
And I love that you talk about that. So now that we are getting to, the 21st of December, and we had this eclipse, I think it was yesterday. What do you think all this means, Mark?
I think it's a good sign. I think that the pain.
I feel good about it too, just so you know.
I think it's sort of, I'm a medium. I'm not an astrologer.
Right.
But I don't discount anything.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I like to keep an open mind. And for thousands of years, people have been looking to the stars for signs and portents and guidance.
Well, it says in the Bible to look to the stars for guidance, if you read it.
Absolutely.
I will put signs in the heaven is what God said. And if we pay attention to them, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but if we pay attention to the signs in the heavens, then it's, God's trying to tell us something here. It's a big message. That's what I think.
And it seems to be no coincidence that it's occurring on the winter solstice.
I know, that's what I was saying.
And for the people, and I would assume people that watch your show know what the solstice is, but for the benefit of those that don't, there's 4 points in the year: the winter solstice, the summer solstice, which is June 21st, the autumnal equinox, which is right around September 21st, and then the vernal or spring equinox, which is March 21st. And those have to do with the position of the Earth around the sun. And as the Earth moves around the sun and how it tilts. I mean, I'm sliding through this. Also, in cultures, pre-electrical cultures, these times of the year were extremely important because they told people when to plant, when to harvest.
Right.
Okay, so in an agrarian society, the spring equinox is a real big deal because now you know to plant. And when you look at a structure like Stonehenge, from the archaeologists who've analyzed it. Also, when I was in Machu Picchu, also at temples in Hawaii, I was in temples in the Yucatan, certainly the Giza Plateau and other structures in Egypt. You could go around the world to all these cultures. Many of them are lined up so that the sun will rise between a particular set of structures on either the vernal equinox or the summer solstice, because it was a form of a calendar, a timepiece that let people know when to plant and when to harvest.
Yeah, and I've seen these in Ireland and Scotland too. And
yes.
Many of you guys have too, and the stone circles, and that's what they're for, they're calendars. Yes, thank you, Mark, for explaining that to the audience. So what do you think? I mean, what do you think on the eclipse that just happened?
Well, I think...
That was yesterday, right? Was it yesterday? Okay, the dates right here.
Yeah, I think it was. Where I was, we couldn't really see it. But eclipses always have huge astrological significance. And I think it's all tied into the change that is coming. Mm-hmm. And, the eclipse being a week away from the conjunction. And it always seems that these conjunctions, it's right above the horizon, right at sunset. And where I live, that would be like where the bigger city is. So it's going to be very hard to see it because of city lights and all that. But I think that if people have the opportunity, you should take a look at this, because from what I understand, that Jupiter is 1,000 times the size of Earth. So it's 1,000 times bigger than us. Saturn is roughly 500 times larger than Earth. These are two huge giant stars and
Right.
planets. And the reason is they both move around the sun at different in other words, a year for Jupiter is 12 of our years, because it takes Jupiter 12 of our years to go around the sun. It takes Saturn 29 of our years to go around the sun. So the fact that where we see them, they're going to be overlapping. They're going to look like one enormous star. And for the people who believe that, that Jesus was born on December 25th, this is sort of an added bonus. For those of us who've studied the phenomena, know that it isn't. However, it's happening on the solstice, which in every culture throughout the world has always had a spiritual and mystical significance.
Yeah, and I'm into astrology like you are. And, I was checking out my horoscope for, December. And they're like, oh, this, because I'm an Aquarius. And they're like, oh, this is like big for you. This hasn't happened in 29 years. So for me personally, and that's why I want everybody to pull out your astrological chart. I mean, I'm going to have some astrologers on the show coming up. I always look at Susan Miller's. I like Susan Miller's astrology because she's been around forever. Or I'll pull up astro.com. I'll give a couple plugs here. But I want you guys to pull up your astrological chart. You can just pop in your birthday, where you were born, the time you were born, because this is a big deal, not just for me because I'm Aquarius, but for everybody. Don't you agree, Mark?
Oh, sure. Sure. I mean, something like this doesn't happen very often.
I know.
And
It's been
so
exciting.
it is fascinating. Well, it's, I mean, there's all the political upheaval and all that. And I always do my best to avoid talking politics.
Right.
I saw comedian Steve Martin recently. He's being interviewed. He says, I never make political jokes because once you do, you lose half the audience. And I found, I've always liked Steve Martin. I always liked his humor. And I always found him gentlemanly.
Right.
He
Yeah.
like his humor. Yeah, he's not rude. He's not crude. He's just downright funny. And I think it's important because when you look at social media, how people that are supporting one side versus the other, and the viciousness that's going on, maybe that's all coming to a head. And maybe like COVID, it needed to happen to expose all of these ills, because until they're revealed, how can we deal with them?
That's true. That's true. I always believe the truth comes out. It takes a while sometimes, but the truth is always revealed. And you're right. A lot of the stuff that's happened over this past year, 2020, when we're supposed to see clearly and have good vision, we're starting to see all these different things. So you don't think it's going to get worse before it gets better?
Oh, I think it is. I think it's getting worse even as we speak with the pandemic. The second wave is hitting. The infections are off the scale. You still have people that think there's some type of conspiracy about wearing masks and things like that, and
What do you
people
think
who
about
are
that?
resistant. I think it's ridiculous. That's my opinion. I've always been, yes, I'm a psychic medium, but I'm also very, very well read in science, and I have a science and physics background. And there have been other plagues throughout human history. The plague of 1918, which killed, I think, 25 million Americans. There was the plague of 1665, where Sir Isaac Newton, while in self-quarantine, invented calculus, the laws of motions, and the law of optics. So sometimes being in quarantine, much to the chagrin of every high school student, he invented calculus.
True, but you don't see a problem. And the reason I bring this up is I have grandkids. I have a little granddaughter, and she wears the mask. She has to wear it at school, and it's really difficult for her. She's kind of tiny.
Sure.
Tiny little girl. And, my daughter was really having a hard time with it. She said, it's leaving marks on her face. She gets claustrophobic. She can't take it off. It's really hard for the little kids. And then I always wondered, if it would be health-wise, if it was such a good idea. But you say you've seen this, your background tells you that it's not an issue health-wise.
No, it's good. I listen to the reports. I read reports from the New England Journal of Medicine, from Harvard Medical School, Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, the Pasteur Institute in Paris, Oxford University, the Japanese Institute of Health. I read everything.
And they say,
And
okay.
yeah, and wearing a mask is our first and best defense at this point. And then the vaccine isn't just going to magically make it go away. It's going
No.
to take time, especially if it requires a series of 2 injections, although there's another vaccine coming out that supposedly is only 1. And then there's people who think that if you get vaccinated, that somehow Bill Gates is injecting a chip into you and will be monitoring you. And it's like, enough. And then there are people who feel that it's bad. The fact of the matter is, polio was eradicated through vaccines. Malaria, yellow fever, controlled by vaccines.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you a second. The only issue that I had, and I heard yesterday, and I'll just bring this up since we're talking about the vaccine, is there was a lady on TV. She was one of the medical experts, and she said, even though you get the vaccine, you'll still need to follow the same procedures. It really
absolutely
doesn't change anything. Right, it doesn't change anything. So it's almost like, okay, we all got the chickenpox vaccine, and now, we don't get chickenpox. And we all got the measles vaccine so that we don't get measles again. And they don't know if you can get this twice. But doesn't it run along the same lines? It's just like the measles or the mumps, where we're getting the vaccine as a preventative measure at this point.
Well, you can get the flu shot and still get the flu. I travel a lot. I'm usually on the road 20 weeks a year at doing spirit communication events and lectures. And, so airborne diseases and I are unfortunately old buddies. Okay. And I get the flu shot every year. And then if I do get the flu, it's not as bad. I remember there was like a couple of years ago, well, I'm not going to get it because, everyone's saying, don't get it. Oh my God, I got so sick. I get it again.
Now, see, I'm the opposite of you. I have never gotten it. Never once.
Do you travel all the time?
Yeah. And I've traveled a lot, but I've just never gotten, I've never gotten the flu shot, and I've never gotten, that sick. Now, I do believe I had the COVID last year in February before it became big. I believe I had it and got over it before we really knew what it was. But when I went to the doctor, of course, they can't tell.
What's your blood type?
I think I'm O positive.
Yeah, the O's are more resistant to COVID. It has to do with the cell wall structure. And apparently the virus has a harder time attaching to the cell wall of the O bloods. Unfortunately, the A bloods, it's like a magnet. Okay.
No, that's the first time I've heard this, Mark.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, no, this is, the French identified this quite some time back.
I didn't know that.
And I heard actually Dr. Fauci, I believe, was talking about this a couple months ago.
Okay.
As well. So other people have been discussing this. Also, it isn't just a lung disease. It attacks your entire body.
Right.
And in younger people, it forms clotting, which is why like young, healthy people will immediately get a heart attack and drop dead, and they don't know why. So it affects people differently. And then they say, well, kids don't get it so bad, they're fine. Yeah, well, guess what? They can carry it and transmit it. So we have to wear the masks. We have to do the protocols until the vaccines, we can get it under control. And a lot of health experts say we're never going to be rid of COVID. Now it's going to be like the common cold and the flu, and it'll be cycling around every year. And I'm like,
that's possible.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
When people say that this is a hoax.
Oh, no, it's not a hoax. I don't think that at all.
Look at this. When the Spanish landed in Central America in the early 1500s, they infected the local populations.
Right, with malaria, wasn't it?
With the flu, with the common cold, with smallpox.
Yeah, smallpox.
Within 10 years, 90% of the people in Central America died because they had no defense to diseases that were no big deal to the Europeans. And then it spread south into South America, so that when the conquistadors under Pizarro entered Peru, he had 150 men against 100,000 Incan soldiers, and the Incas were too sick to fight and were defeated. So, this has happened before.
Right.
It's just that they're not teaching this in our schools in history.
Right.
I went to Catholic school, and the conquistadors were good guys because they brought the Catholic faith. And then you read what they were really like, and it's like, no, these people weren't good guys. But that's a whole nother wrap we can get into.
We're just about out of time. But I'm really glad that you came on today and that we had a chance to talk about the holiday. And we talked a lot about the COVID, but that's okay. People need to hear this stuff, what other people feel,
Well, they do. And I know a lot of people are going to take exception to what I say. And you know what? You're absolutely right. That's why we live in a free society.
Mm-hmm.
There was something, if I got real quick, when I was a teen, I was in Russia, and it was still communist then. And I was a bit of a smart aleck, and I was sitting in a class. It was Americans, and this Russian guy was teaching it. We called him the product of the state because everything was so pro-communist government. And I was the budding law student. And I said, wait a second, you're talking about the communist constitution of the USSR has the same rights as America, like freedom of speech? And he walked over to me, and he leaned down and put his hands on my desk. It was like very intimidating. And he goes, American boy, difference between Russian Constitution and American Constitution is not freedom of speech, but freedom after you make speech.
Oh my God.
And so it reaffirmed my commitment that freedom of speech and belief is important to all of us. If you disagree with me, you have a right to do that. However, be smart, be safe, and when it comes to this pandemic, let science be your guide. And for those of you who say, well, God will protect me. Yes, God will. That's why God gave you gray matter between your ears,
God gave you a brain.
so that you can use your gray matter to follow the science. Yes, God is protecting us. God gave us the equipment and the knowledge and the scientists to do it.
Right. And you know what? He gave us the brain, and he also gave us intuition. And I want to throw this out here really quick before we end the show today, you guys. I'm really big on people starting to learn to use their own intuition, so they don't need to call Mark, or they don't need to call me and get a psychic reading. That use your gut feeling, go with your gut and start doing a little meditation and connect into the divine, because that's what brings you peace. And I just want to throw that out there at the holiday season. That's how you're going to get peace, is to go within and connect with the divine. So let me say that for our Christmas message today.
And for those of you who don't know what to give the person who's lost a loved one, I recommend my books, Never Letting Go and Evidence of Eternity. You can find out about both of them on my website, evidenceofeternity.com. And my books have been recommended by Helping Parents Heal, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, the Edgar Cayce Association, and hospices and grief organizations worldwide for helping people get through grief. And also, if you go to my website, evidenceofeternity.com, please sign up for my newsletter, follow me on social media, and you'll find out about my calendar of events and my new show, The Psychic in the Doc, that I'm doing with Dr. Pat Basile.
That's right. Now, when's that on? Tell the audience when it's on.
Yeah, it's on every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, which would be 4 p.m. Pacific. And also, you'll find out the next time I'll be on High Road to Humanity with Nancy. So thank you for having me on your show. And everyone, this is a very challenging Christmas. Be smart. My family, we're not getting together. We're going to call and Zoom. And we already said we all love you and all that. We know it. And we said next year we'll do the big gluttonous Italian, happy holiday Christmas. But for everyone, have a blessed and peaceful holiday season.
Right. Mark, thanks for coming on. You guys definitely check out his books. They're really great. And we've had Mark on the show before, and you can go back and look at the video and the show that when I had Mark on before with his books. But for the Christmas season, yeah, definitely, you know, remember your loved ones and stay safe. And don't forget to check out my website too, nancyyearout.com. Hey, we got a new class that I'm putting on. It is Intuitive Business Practices, and that's going to be available in January. So, hey, you guys, have a safe and happy holiday. Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, and happy holidays to everybody. Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure as always.
All right, we'll see you next time, you guys. Take care.